So my name is Dr. Ryan Lee. I am a psychotherapist. I specialize in working with former members of high control religions. Primarily I work with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. They are very big on separating you from the world in the most extreme sense. People are leaving high control religions of all forms, and I've seen more and more that people are really creating outlets like the show that you have as a way of connecting with other people. And I know that there really aren't too many therapists that specialize in this area like I do. So when trauma really has a hold on you, whether consciously or unconsciously, it plays a role and shades every experience you have. Our ways of thinking and feeling are a result of deeply embedded pathways, and it's hard to change those pathways because once a pathway is deep, it becomes easier to just go along the set path that you have carved out in one way or another. It's possible to have the feeling of anger, express it, and not get stuck in it. It's important, we naturally avoid thinking about things that trouble us, but in avoiding those, we don't solve them, they just stay there, So ayahuasca has this way, for a lot of people, and myself included, of like taking you by the hand and go, look at this. You need to look at this, And that may be problems with your relationships or traumas that you've been holding on to, pain of people, what ways people have hurt you that you haven't been able to let go. And then through that process of connecting with it, generally speaking, when all goes well, it culminates in a purge. I don't say that with bitterness or maliciousness. I don't think they're bad people. Generally speaking, they mean well. They're well-intentioned, but they treat this life as if it is garbage world, meaning everything that exists in this life is ruled by Satan and therefore is not something you want any part of. And you defer any sort of pleasure or engagement with this life for the idea that this world will be destroyed at some point and then the good life will come. So no, I think even though it's well-intentioned, it's life-sucking. It teaches the one thing that we have, which is so precious, this moment right now. It takes that away from you.
This is Infants on Thrones.
Baby steps.
You want someone to preach to?
The philosophies of men.
I like magical toys.
What religion do you?
Mingled with humor.
I don't believe in them.
There will be many willing to preach to you the philosophies of men mingled with humor.
We are evolving.
Baby steps.
You can buy anything in this world of money.
Look for the good in everything. Look for the people who will set your soul free. It always seems impossible until it's done. Look for the good in everyone.
Welcome back to Infants on Thrones. I'm Glenn Ostland, and this is episode 722. Religious Recovery with ex-Jehovah's Witness, Dr. Ryan Lee. Now, Dr. Lee is a psychotherapist who grew up in the U.S., but now lives in Peru, where he's been facilitating integration for ayahuasca ceremonies. So we talked today about Mormons versus J-dubs, some of the common challenges for people coming out of high-control religious groups, what healing looks like, and the role that ayahuasca has played for Dr. Lee and for many of his clients. It's a good conversation. I think you're really going to enjoy it, and it starts right now. All right, Ryan, thank you for coming on Infants on Thrones.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. We tried it a couple of weeks ago. The internet connection was bad. You're living down in Peru, and you just moved into a new place with better internet, so we're trying again. And why don't you introduce yourself to my audience? Just let them know who you are, what you do, and why it is that you think that I was interested in talking with you. That'd be kind of fun.
I mean, I can answer the first part. I think you would be a better person to ask why you're interested.
I would, but that's what makes it fun. I want to know what you think.
Well, so my name is Dr. Ryan Lee. I am a psychotherapist. I specialize in working with former members of high control religions. Primarily I work with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. I have also worked with fundamentalist Baptist and some different Christian movements or cults, as you might call them. But primarily my specialization is in working with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. And I think I'm pretty well suited for that for a number of reasons. But one is that I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness myself till the age of 18. And yeah, I really enjoy what I do. And what was the other question? Why do you want to talk to me?
Yeah, why do you think I reached out to you?
Well, I guess my sense is that there's a growing community of former Jehovah's Witnesses, and people are leaving high control religions of all forms, and I've seen more and more that people are really creating outlets like the show that you have as a way of connecting with other people. And I know that there really aren't too many therapists that specialize in this area like I do. So so I'm guessing that's why you're interested in talking.
Yeah. So this podcast is mainly for ex-Mormons. I've been doing this podcast since 2012, but within the last few years, especially, I've really been interested in, okay, now what? We've figured out that this high control religion, I like that term, that this high control religion isn't what it presented itself to be. It's maybe having some negative impacts on my life. I want to heal. I want to be healthy. How do we do that? And I've been really interested in that question, and especially like how did this religion shape me? what are the mental habits of focus and the cognitive distortions and these kinds of things that I'm carrying around that might have been formed by being a part of a high control. Is that high control religion? High context?
Yeah.
Control? High control religion. Yeah. So that's really it. And then a mutual acquaintance of ours gave me your name because he knows that I'm in this, interested in this. And he said, oh, you might be interested in reaching out and talking with Ryan. He's a shaman for ayahuasca ceremonies. And that's something that I know you've done down in Peru, working with those ayahuasca ceremonies. So I'm interested to hear your story. I'm interested to hear a little bit about what your experience was like growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, and we can kind of compare notes maybe because I was a Mormon missionary. I went to Japan, and we didn't really have many Jehovah's Witnesses. There were a couple of times we'd run into, we'd call you guys J-dubs. Yeah. And it was always the competition between the J-dubs and the Mormons as to who was going to get to the house first. Did you guys feel that too? Did you see Mormon missionaries as like your competitors?
No, I mean, we definitely joked around the Mormons being kind of like a sister group.
Well,
it's funny. As a witness, I don't think we really compared ourselves or felt rivaled by anybody, because Jehovah's Witnesses, and maybe Mormons like this too, they're very single-minded in thinking that they are the only ones with the truth, and every other religion falls in the category of wrong.
Yeah, right.
Like they literally call themselves the truth. They refer to it as the truth. Yeah. And so whether it be Mormon or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever, it's all the same category to a Jehovah's Witness. That said, I mean, you are the other group. Mormons are the other group known for going door to door, which is a unique quality. Yeah. And I find I've had a few experiences with former Mormons as friends, and I get into more competition now over who had it worse.
Oh, really?
You have no idea what we had to go through.
All right. Well, I actually had a pretty nice experience as a Mormon, so I think I might give you that yours was worse right off the bat without even hearing it. But maybe we could play that game a little bit. What was it about your experience that was really bad?
I'm trying to parse out the general from the specific. There were specific challenges related to my family and mental health issues in my family and some dysfunction there. But well, generally speaking, I think the things that are common to all Jehovah's Witnesses that they struggle with is that they are very big on separating you from the world in the most extreme sense.
Yeah.
So not only are you not supposed to celebrate any holidays, you are strongly discouraged openly from pursuing any higher education than high school, from pursuing any type of career that for the purpose of, the sake of a career or pursuing wealth. You are not allowed to spend any time outside of school or work with people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses. They teach you very explicitly that anybody who's not a Jehovah's Witness is in one way or another, the devil is controlling them. Satan is controlling them.
Yeah.
And they are a tool for Satan to try to lure you away from Jehovah's Witnesses. So they repeatedly will say things like, oh, these people will seem so nice and they'll treat you very nice, but deep down what's going on there is they're trying to lure you away. So, they do everything they can. And then on top of that, they limit what type of entertainment you can consume, what type of things you can read. You can't even go into another church. You can't read other books on other religions. They put out, Jehovah's Witnesses make their own books and they tell you about other religions, and then they tell you why they're wrong,
I think there's
it's very isolating.
I think there's degrees of that within Mormonism, but I don't think that it's quite as extreme as what you're describing there. But it's close. But I'll give you the victory in the whose was worse.
You could cede the win for this one.
Yeah. You can have it there. So what was it that shook you out of that said, okay, I'm going to defy? Well, actually, before I ask that question, I want to know, was there any redeeming part of being a Jehovah's Witness for you? Were there things that you learned or experiences that you had that you still look at as being really valuable, that you're grateful for? No.
In short, I'm going to be careful how I say that because I don't want to give the impression that I'm bitter. I'm not. Here's the thing. I could tell you, because I was Jehovah's Witness, I was going out in service, which means going door to door.
Yeah.
And I was going on stage at the Kingdom Hall, which is another word of church.
Yeah.
So I developed good public speaking skills.
Yeah.
So yes, I can give them that, but also I could have easily developed good public speaking skills without dedicating 18 years of my life and missing out on every social event and every milestone that a normal kid should go through.
So if you're balancing the positive things that came out with the negative environment that you were in, it's a net negative experience. It wouldn't.
Yeah, and again, it's not. I don't say that with bitterness or maliciousness. I don't think they're bad people. They generally speaking, they mean well. Yeah, they're well intentioned, but they treat this life as if it is. I paraphrase it by they treat it like garbage world, meaning everything that exists in this life is ruled by Satan and therefore is not something you want any part of. And you defer any sort of pleasure or engagement with this life for the idea that this world will be destroyed at some point, and then the good life will come. Yeah. Then you'll get the paradise. So no, I think even though it's well intentioned, it's life sucking. Yeah. It teaches the one thing that we have, which is so precious, this moment right now. Yeah. It takes that away from you, and so.
It distorts it, yeah. And that's what Mormonism did for me as well. What I heard you say was vilifying the world. Mm-hmm. You're really demonizing anybody who isn't part of your in-group. Right. And you just don't develop any tools for really accepting people as they are, because you've already made these assumptions about them being bad or evil or dangerous and garbage world. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I experienced that as well. So was that when you became 18 and you decided I'm done with this? It was like a conscious awareness that you were walking away from that.
Yeah, I think there was a couple of things that put chinks in the armor. Yeah, that caused me to question. One was my stepfather at the time was physically abusive to my mother, and Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in divorce pretty much under any circumstances, or very, very selective circumstances. And repeatedly, my mom and my stepfather would get in these disagreements that would end in these physical altercations. Some of them were pretty significant that she had to take a hospital visit to. And we'd go through multiple cycles where we'd leave the house for a little while to safety. But then we'd have these meetings with the elders of the congregation, and my mom would say, it was basically going there to try to get some kind of approved separation. And every single time they'd say no. They'd say, no, your life isn't in danger. So you need to go back. And that to me was one of the biggest things that started making me question it, because I was living this life, and I always thought that these elders were there to protect us and look out for us. And they kept sending us back into this thing. But so that was part of it. It was really, there was a lot to it. But the other major piece was I never really had friends in school. I was kind of made fun of for being a Jehovah's Witness, and something changed in high school. I had always wanted to be part of theater, but we're not allowed to do after school activities. And there was a loophole, because there was a class offered during school hours that you could take, and it was a theater class. So that was technically okay, because it was an academic class. In reality, the class was like an hour and a half of high schoolers just goofing off.
Sure.
But it was during that time I made friends, and I met really, really great people that accepted me for who I was, and there was a lot of theater too, which I was really a big fan of doing that. And I was accepted for the first time in my life, and realized these people are not ruled by the devil. They're good people, and so there's a lot more to it. But I think that there was a couple things that happened. First of all, I remember the prom was coming up, and I really wanted to go to the prom, but Jehovah's Witnesses weren't allowed to go to the prom. And again, I went to one of the elders and I said, look, I know we don't typically go to proms, but I met some really good people that I'm never going to see again. This is going to be the last time I'm ever going to see them. I can't spend time with them outside of school, and I really want to go. This is really important to me, just to be able to say goodbye, and I'm not going to drink. I'm not going to do anything I'm not supposed to do. And they said no. They said basically I would be in a lot of trouble if I did. And so I said, screw it, I'm going. And these seem kind of like superficial reasons, but they were really important at the time. And then alongside that, I was kind of waking up at a rapid pace at that time too. I was starting asking questions, and I was going, is this really the right religion? And kind of had that realization of, this kind of like, oh, you're telling me there are thousands of religions in the world, and they all believe that they're the only right one, and I'm in one of them.
Yeah.
And this particular one is keeping me from doing all of these things that I want to do with my life. It kind of very quickly, it all fell apart. And then I was like, I'm done. I'm leaving.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. So you mentioned the elders several times, and it made me wonder about the hierarchy within Jehovah's Witness. So let me tell you a little bit about the way that the Mormon Church was, and you might already know this, but so 1820s, 1830s, this guy Joseph Smith claims he was visited by God and Jesus Christ, and they said all the other churches are bad. You're going to start the good one. You're going to restore the ancient church that's been lost to apostasy, and it's all going to be revealed through you, and we're going to give you priesthood, and we're going to lead and guide you the entire way. And so ever since that time, there's been a prophet/president of the church who the members all believe is having regular communication with Jesus, aka Jehovah. And still to this day, believing Mormons really believe that the church, even little decisions like, we're not going to call ourselves Mormons anymore, we're going to make sure to call ourselves the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, that's coming directly from Jesus through the prophet. And then there's this priesthood patriarchal authority structure, that there are local leaders that, if they tell you to do something, it's just like the prophet or just like Jesus is telling you to do it. Does Jehovah's Witness have a similar structure, like where you went to these elders and really believe that they are essentially God interceding to God for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know how literally you meant in terms of talking directly to Jesus.
Pretty literally, for as far as like the prophet of the church, they believe that, like he'll appear to them and talk to them and maybe even sit in their meetings when they have their weekly meetings. It just depends.
Yeah.
But that belief's pretty widely accepted.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So that's not quite so literal in Jehovah's Witnesses, but there is a hierarchy. So at the top is the governing body, is a group of 12 men, mostly old white men,
Same.
who who are at the top and are the mouthpiece of God. Now they don't claim, I don't think for the most part, to literally speak or have conversations with Jesus, but they believe that they are divinely inspired, that God leads his flock
Right.
through this governing body. And then there are multiple levels. There's the circuit overseer, which is like a regional overseer, and then the providing overseer, which is like the congregational head elder. And then there's multiple elders beneath them, and then beneath them is ministerial servants that are sort of like in between, and and so on and so forth.
Yeah, we have that too. General authorities and regional authorities and stake presidents and bishops and all kinds of things like that.
There's a big part of it. I mean, that's a big part. I don't know how it is with Mormons, but for Jehovah's Witnesses, that I think is a big part of what keeps people in. There's all this sort of striving, like, oh, you became a ministerial servant. Oh, you became an elder. And that means something.
Right.
And so people strive, and there's so much esteem given to these roles in a lot of cases, which they don't actually mean so much, but to have that title within that group, means something, and people gain a lot of their own sense of self-confidence and esteem through those roles.
Yeah. That's very similar to Mormonism, especially in Utah, where a lot of the general authorities live, and there's quite a culture of hero worship around them. Like if you spot one of them at the local McDonald's, it's like seeing a rock star or a movie star or something like that. Like, wow, you tell your friends, I saw Elder Ballard or something like that.
Yeah.
So with that hierarchy, what's the personal relationship with God? Like, did you believe that you were able to, through prayer, get inspiration and have some kind of personal or direct relationship, or was it always mediated through these authority figures?
I guess there's two answers to that question. So they do encourage you to pray directly to Jehovah and develop a personal relationship. And as far as that goes, I'll say I can't speak for everybody, but at least the people I work with and that leave the organization, I very commonly hear them report, and I had this experience myself, that they feel like they're just talking to thin air. You know, that you're encouraged to have this relationship, but I think to your point, there's this sense that it's really the organization, the governing body, that you're having the relationship with. And when it comes down to making decisions about your life, literally about everything, there is always something to defer to from the governing body or the Watchtower and Tract Society, which they produce all the literature. No matter what, right down to what type of music you listen to, how you raise your kids, that kind of thing. They sometimes, if they can't find something that is directly backed up by the Bible, they'll often do this thing. Well, they'll state what you should do, but then they'll say, well, it's a conscience matter, but would a good Christian, for example, I remember when I was a little kid, I liked rap. And it was kind of I was growing up in the 80s and in the early 90s, and it was just kind of becoming popular. And I was listening to very clean rap. I was listening to DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince, you know.
Yeah.
It's the cleanest like rap you can find out there, you know.
Uh-huh.
And I loved it though.
But the parents just don't understand though.
Yeah, that's a rebellious attitude right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the article came out and said, now is all rap bad? No, not all rap bad. Not all rap is bad, but a lot of it's bad. And would a good Christian really want to be seen or observed listening to this type of music, which so often is filled with misogyny and this and this and that? You know, so they wouldn't say no, but they'd say it in such a way that it became a rule anyways. And so all of a sudden we can't listen to rap, you know?
Yeah. One of the reasons that I asked that question about authority is this is one of those common themes that I see when ex-Mormons are, you know, or when Mormons are leaving the church is, okay, now what? I used to know where to go to get answers to my questions, and now I don't know. Like, who's going to tell me? And I experienced this too, where I hadn't really developed that trust in myself. And even though it's funny, because when I look back on it, I was always doing whatever the hell I wanted to do anyway.
Yeah.
But I expected that if I did X, Y, or Z, then I would get these things that were promised from it. And when I rejected that and walked away from it, then it's like, okay, well, now what? I don't have my entire life spelled out in front of me. Is that something common among the patients that you treat?
Absolutely. Yeah. What you're describing, I mean, I could list off 5 or 6 common things, but that's got to be top 3.
Yeah.
Which is everything in my life has been according to this external source of approval.
Yeah.
And just like you said, it's if you do this, you get that, X, Y, and Z, and that's how it is. And then they leave. And the reality of the world is, it's not black and white; it's gray. And you know, there isn't a. I don't want to. I'm trying I don't want to be sensitive to people who still have strong belief in the Bible, but past that, there's really no manual for life. You know,
I don't think that many listeners of this podcast are going to get upset if you throw the Bible under the bus.
Yeah, for me personally, I see the Bible as very much written by man, and it's a document that records man's attempt to try to create meaning, to find meaning, to have direction, to consolidate wisdom,
to justify wiping out other people in the region and take their land.
Yep. Yeah. There's that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, to get back to your point, that's the biggest task when you leave is now you got to think for yourself. Well, what's right? What's wrong? What's okay? What's an okay way to act or talk? Is there an okay way to talk? You know, is swearing okay? You know, that whatever. I jokingly say that when I left, I went down the list of commandments and tried most of them out.
Oh,
you know, and for a period of time, I would steal. I was a shoplifter for a while. I would just lie blatantly just to get out of stuff, just to try it on, you know? And in those 2 examples, I ended up feeling like, you know what, that doesn't feel good. I don't really like that. That's not who I want to be. So you figured it out
on your own instead of just leaning on what you were told.
Exactly. Whereas other ones like, I don't know, fornication or whatever, you know, there's other ones I was like, no, I'm okay with that. Sex before marriage I don't have a problem with that. But that's the task, I think, for most people, whether they do it that way or another way. They need to try out just doing things and seeing how it feels, and then rebuilding their own value system.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you could list maybe 5 or 6 of the common things that people experience as they're leaving, and that one of them is this. Okay, what do I do now? How do you counsel them? What is it that you're trying to do when you're working with somebody who comes to you with that kind of a problem? Is it this approach to say, try things out and pay attention to how it makes you feel?
That's definitely a part of it. But let's see how I can split up. I mean, there's definitely a part of that to try things out, and within the context of therapy, like people are worried that they'll try things out and then they'll spiral out of control. And
Yeah.
that's part of this is recognizing you can make mistakes, and it is, how do I put it? Sometimes people will come to me and they start making me the authority.
Yeah. Oh, for
Right.
sure. I can
And as
totally
soon
see
as I
that.
pick that up, it's important for me to like stop that from happening and help
Yeah.
them recognize I'm not the authority either.
Yeah.
But I use that position to help encourage people and feel better about making their own choices. But I would say, generally speaking, the way I work with people, there's multiple layers. So there's definitely a layer where this is actually straight up therapy. I rarely encounter somebody who comes and just has issues only related to the religion.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
almost always dysfunctional family or some kind of trauma. There's always other stuff.
Yeah.
So I'll put that in its own category of there's a lot of stuff we work on that's just like typical therapy, working on anxiety, depression, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But with indoctrination, the idea is starting out usually by kind of taking inventory of how they've been affected personally. And it's important because everyone takes away their own few things. So for example, some people get hang-ups about sex and they feel really guilty of anything having to do with sex. Other people have no problem with that. Other people have Armageddon fears. You know, they reject a religion, but there's still, every time there's an earthquake or a global pandemic or,
Yeah.
you know,
Or a raid on the U.S. Capitol.
Exactly. Yeah. They see it. Maybe this is a sign of the times. What if I was wrong?
Yeah.
Existential anxiety. That's another big one that comes up. And trying to figure out, who is God? What is God? Do I even believe in God? Is there a right religion? What's my purpose in life? If I'm not here to save other people, then what am I here for? What do I do with myself? Social issues are a big one. Authenticity, feeling authentic, being able to just connect and feel like they're acting in a way that is true to themselves, because a lot of times they don't know what their themselves is. They feel like so much of who they are has just been built on this organization and the needs of the organization. So discovering who they are underneath all that. So generally speaking, we take inventory, identify the areas, the sticking points, and then the next step is to work on those sticking points. Before we try to change them, we try to really understand them.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you the end point for a lot of these things. Like, say, for example, one common thing is some people, ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, they have a hard time doing things that are only for themselves, to make themselves feel good, because there's so much pressure and value put on being overly humble, putting your own needs aside, putting everybody else first, you know, that kind of thing. And it feels wrong for them to do something that's purely for themselves. So the end result there is probably going to be, we're going to help you take the steps to work against that feeling. You know,
do you see do you see any difference in gender? Like, do women feel that more strongly than men, or do both feel it equally? Because I definitely recognize that as something that stems from Mormonism as well. But I think, at least from the women that I've talked to, they feel it very, very strongly, that their role is to sacrifice themselves and just support all of the men around them. And the men kind of feel like, they have to defer to whoever their leaders are above them, but they're kind of the ones that are in charge, and doing things for themselves might not be as difficult as it would be for women.
I know what you're saying, and for some reason, from what I know of Mormonism, that observation seems to make sense. I think there's a strong patriarchy in Mormonism.
Right. Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. There's that in Jehovah's Witnesses too. But what I think about the Jehovah's Witnesses I've worked with, or ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, I don't feel like there's a distinct difference. I feel like there's a universal feeling there.
Okay. Well, then I'm gonna claim a victory for the ex-Mormon women on this one vicariously.
Point to Mormons.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think you're right there. But yeah, just to finish the thought, generally where we end up with somebody is recognizing that I feel a certain way, or I feel inhibited in a certain area, or I feel guilty about doing something myself because I was taught to feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
But before we can get to the part where we start taking choices that work against that feeling, we need to understand that that feeling was put there on purpose, that they were taught to feel that way on purpose, that it serves the organization, that this is not something that's a reflection of who they are naturally, but how they were taught to feel. And then the end point is always, okay, now that we know this, now that we've done this research and we've kind of gone through your history and understand why you've been taught to feel this way, the final step is we're going to find ways where you're going to treat yourself to this thing, even though you feel guilty, and we're going to do it as almost as an experiment. Little by little, we're going to find little things where you can do to go against that feeling, and then have the experience that nothing happens, that you're not struck by lightning, that it's okay for you to do something that's just for you, that kind of thing.
I've been reading a book recently that's really my podcast listeners might be sick of hearing me talk about this, but it's called Inner Size. I don't know if you're familiar with it or not, but it's about the brain. It's how to do exercises, but for your mind, to increase your awareness and focus and creativity and all these different things that we do in our mind. And it talked about how really everything, whether it's a thought or a movement, everything that we do and experience is a neural pathway. It's these neuron synapses communicating with each other in our brains. And so when I hear you talking about you were meant to feel this feeling, the church wanted you to feel this way, what I hear that is they were encouraging you very strongly to create these neural pathways in your mind. And let's first recognize you have this architecture of mind that is the reason why you're feeling the way that you're feeling. So let's change that. Do you think of it from that perspective, that you're like changing the architecture of the brain with these neural pathways at all, or that your patients know that they have some control over what they're doing in making these changes with this malleable mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting because what you said is exactly right. Although I'm not a neuropsychologist, so
Right.
it's not. I don't necessarily think in brain in anatomical terms, biological terms. But
Right.
But you're absolutely right, 100%. That's exactly how it works, and that's exactly in line with my approach to these things. Is that our ways of thinking and feeling are a result of deeply embedded pathways, and it's hard to change those pathways because once a pathway is deep, it becomes easier to just go along the set path that you have carved out in one way or another.
And
so
most of them are in the subconscious part of we're not even aware that we have these deep programs that are running the show.
Yes.
And so I would imagine a lot of what you're doing is helping them become more aware of some of these programs that are deep within their subconscious, to put it in that language.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a big part of what we're doing, is becoming aware of how they were put there, how they affect us, how they play out. Taking an observer stance on what is the consequences, how does this feel when I make this choice over and over again?
Yeah.
And that's important because the change is difficult. It's not torturous. It can be smooth, but it's challenging, and it requires, you need to have a good foundation of knowledge and understanding of why you're doing this before you can have a good chance at being able to do it successfully.
Yeah.
Because it does involve being uncomfortable.
And I like something that you said earlier. I don't remember exactly how you said it, but letting them know that it's okay to try things and make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that if you do have this deeply ingrained habit, it's not easy to just like flip a switch and go, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. There's going to be times where that's what is natural to us, the way that we respond, and to be like self-compassionate and forgiving and allow ourselves to make that mistakes. I would imagine that that's a big part of the healing process as well.
Absolutely. And that's one of those that I think is pretty backed by the Bible and teachings of Jesus.
Right.
That God is forgiving, and It makes me think of, I don't know if Mormons have a version of this, but when Jehovah's Witnesses leave, or when they're pointing to someone who's leaving, they have this way of minimizing and reducing their reasons for doing so.
Yes,
They
we have that.
they'll put it as like, oh, they are being sucked away by sin. They're leaving because of the sins of the flesh, the desire to have sex, or
Exactly.
to have drugs, or whatever. It's all these petty reasons.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I can't think of anybody I've encountered where that's been the actual story.
Yeah.
The actual story for almost every single person is, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
Something about this doesn't feel right. And the more they pursue that train of thought, the more they see all the things that are problematic. And anyways, just to kind of link with this idea for forgiveness and allowing yourself to make mistakes,
Yeah.
I always encourage people, speak to God, connect to God, and whatever God that is for you. I don't have to tell you, my own perspective, but whatever God you think may be out there, to talk to him or her or it.
Yeah.
And if he or she or it
Yeah.
created you, then they know what's in your heart.
Yeah.
And and everything in the Bible says that, if your heart is pure and open, that God will guide you accordingly.
Yeah.
Um,
And I just want to add to that, because I know that there's a large portion of my audience who are atheist, and like anytime they hear the word God, they're just like, "Ugh, don't
Yeah.
trigger me. I've been abused by these symbols of God too many times in the past." So
yeah.
so if you can't do that with God, what Ryan's saying, how about with your own subconscious? Because what you just said, it knows more than you know. It knows
Yeah.
more about you. Like, what more than your own subconscious mind that is a part of your biology, a part of your nervous system, that's been recording every single experience that you've had throughout your life? It's in there. Address, if you're going to pray to anything and you can't pray to God, think about your own subconscious and talk to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's the same thing. And I only frame it the way I do because I'm more used to working with people who are kind of trying to let go of the attachments. And so that's sort of a way of thinking about it that helps them bridge that gap between worlds.
Yeah.
People that are already in the atheist camp, they're already there.
Yeah. And I've been there and then kind of gravitated back into okay, I'm more comfortable talking about God now, but there was a time where I just didn't want to hear that word at all. I didn't want to consider it. But I'm much more interested in it now.
When it makes sense. Like, I mean, I used to, I remember for a long period of time, like somebody mentioned the word Jesus and I'm like, ugh, my stomach turned, because it was just used in so many different ways that were unpleasant and mildly traumatizing. And I felt that way for a long time until I started doing some of my own research. I don't know if you've heard of the Lost Gospels. Not that I'm a huge Jesus friend, but to me, the history that I've read about him, I actually had a lot of respect for him as a historical figure. It seems like he probably did exist at some time. My take on it is that he was probably a person with an elevated consciousness, somebody that was a little bit a forward thinker. Yeah. I don't think he was the son of God. I don't think he performed actual miracles. I think that stuff all got added later. Anyways, my point is that
as a way of legitimizing Constantine's power.
Exactly. It's hard to be religious when you've done that kind of research.
Yeah. Or spiritual, if you make a distinction between the two things. But again, I feel like I did go into that camp of rejecting those things, and then I've slowly over the years come back to where I consider myself now to be a spiritual person that is just really in awe of the mysteries of nature, and just the things that I want to understand, but know that I just can't.
Yeah.
Like that's really, really interesting to me. And then recognizing that everything that we say to each other, communicate to each other, it's all symbols.
Yeah.
We're all, like the words that we use, the stories that we tell, these images, it's just symbols. And I don't ever want to get attached to those symbols again, like I did in the past, and thinking that these symbols are real things.
Yeah. I think that's the key. Is I don't think that the thing is to throw out all the symbols. It's
Right.
just to loosen your grip on
Yeah.
like trying to hold so tightly and make them so black and white,
Yeah.
definitive. They should be
Yeah.
growing and loose and flexible according to your needs and
Yeah. And
serve a
then
purpose.
what that's freed me up to do is to become genuinely curious and interested in other people's symbols without feeling like it's a threat, So I could look at somebody's view of their personal relationship with Jesus the same way that I would look at some work of art in Tibet or something like that, like
Sure.
a really beautiful painting or a beautiful piece of music or something like that. Like I want to know how people express themselves through these symbols, because they're projecting who they are, what they think, and it's coming out in this form of symbols. So I can understand them better if I'm more open to accepting their symbols for what they're telling me it is, without being like having that clinging attachment to this is a real thing that's going to threaten me somehow, or whatever that is.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know if you've had this experience, but like when you start becoming interested in other people's symbols, understanding their language, in my experience, I found more and more that you find that underneath the basic mechanisms are the same. Their desire for love, desire for connection, desire to be seen, understood, cared for, to be part of a group, to be accepted in a community, they're similar ideas that are just expressed in different colors.
Yeah, totally. Well, okay. So this has been a fascinating conversation so far, Ryan. I want to talk about ayahuasca now.
Sure.
Maybe talk a little bit about what the work that you've done down in Peru and how you came into working with ayahuasca, and what it has meant for you and how you've seen it impact other people's lives.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about how I came about working with it. I had some psychedelic experiences in my early 20s, which were both amazing and terrifying. It was kind of a mixed bag. It really connected me with something greater, and I kind of peeled back the veil of illusion, and really saw through some things and changed the way I saw things, but also, how do I put it? It can be scary.
Scary.
There's some ideas that, when you have that ego loss. And so anyways, when I was younger, I really didn't treat it with the respect that it needed to be treated with, and so I would do it at parties, at concerts, and have very mixed results. And then had enough bad experiences that I said, I can't do that anymore. But I'd always wanted to return to that world, and really had wished that there was some kind of setting that you could partake in that kind of experience, but in a respectful, reverent type of atmosphere where, people are taking care of you. And, so anyways, cut to maybe 15 years later, I heard about this thing called ayahuasca from a friend of mine, and he said it was exactly like what I had kind of always wished for, which is it's done in a ceremony, and there's somebody who's leading over the ceremony, and there's people that are assisting to make sure everyone, stays safe and facilitates and assists people as they need it, and just gives you an opportunity to really go deep within yourself. And I went down to Peru with a friend of mine and had a life-changing experience. At the time, I was still carrying a lot of depression with me. I don't know if I would say I was suicidal, but I was at the point where I really very often wished to not be alive, which is, there's a slight distinction there.
Were you a psychotherapist at this point?
Yeah, I had gotten my doctorate, but I was working in corporate. So I was managing a group of therapists, basically. And there was a lot of things I got from the experience, but I would say I walked away with the realization that the reason I was so unhappy is that I was spending so much of my life, and I was working 50, 60 hours a week. And I was spending so much of my time and my life on things that really didn't matter. And not spending hardly any time on the things that did matter, meaning my
This was
family,
one
my
of your
connections.
this was one of your insights during that first ayahuasca experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, yeah. And so it really changed everything. And I came down again about 5 or 6 months later, and on that second trip decided I'm moving down here. And I went back to my job and I said, I was ready to quit it, but I said,
Mhm.
well, instead of quitting, why don't I just do this? I said, I want to work half as much as I've been working, and I only want to do the parts of the job that I like.
Yeah.
I don't want to, and I was just expecting them to say no. I was ready to go anyways, and
Yeah.
they said, okay. And they gave me that opportunity, and it worked out. And so I came down to Peru and started doing ayahuasca integration therapy. So I'd work with people on retreats, and I'd work with them outside of the ceremonies, before and
Yeah.
after, helping them integrate. And I got to say, it's amazing how it works with people. It I did probably like 9 different retreats over about a year and a half. So each one has maybe 12 to 15 people. So easily over 100 people that I've worked with. Um, and everybody, I want to be careful how I say it. It's not a cure all. It doesn't like quote unquote fix everything, but everybody had this experience that was unique to them, that gave them exactly what they needed.
Mm.
I see how people came down with trauma, with depression, with anxiety, so many different things that they've struggled with for years, that have been resistant to traditional therapy or traditional medication, and have this kind of life-changing experience um, where they walked away a changed person. Now they still had work to do. They still in these. It's not like life goes perfectly after that, but all of a sudden
Right.
they connected to what they needed to do, with their own work.
So they found that inner authority figure.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Actually, it's a great connection.
Yeah.
In fact, that's what if I could just say one more thing, that would be the pattern I noticed with people is every time they come down for a retreat, there'd be a 10-day retreat. For the first half of the week, I was kind of hand holding them a little bit, sitting them, reassuring them everything's going to be okay, telling them how to handle things if things go a certain way, helping them try to make sense of the things they're experiencing. And almost every single time by the end of that week, they really didn't need me because they had connected with what they needed to do. And then I was just there to kind of cheerlead them on.
Yeah. Cool. I'd like to hear a bit of description about what your experience was like, because I know that everybody has different experiences with ayahuasca. I mean, any kind of psychedelics anyway, but some people see visions, some people hear things, some people like experience different times of their life as if they're there. I know people who've like experienced being born or dying, things like that. What were your experiences like?
I don't mind answering the question, but I'll just let you know I am going to be a little guarded about they're personal, and I don't mind you asking the question.
Okay.
It's just
sometimes
there's certain things that the attempt to put them into words minimizes the experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm very careful about that. That said, I can say that generally speaking, I'm not a visual person. There are people I know who are visual. I have a friend who would completely visit a different world. I know I have multiple friends who are like this. I've never been like this. I'm a feeler. So my experiences most of them have been challenging. For anybody who hasn't tried this and might be interested, it's worth doing your research because it's not a party. It is different for each person, but for some people, and I'm one of them, they can be really hard. There's a lot of physical nausea, vomiting. It puts you in kind of a state that's really intense and can be challenging. That's how most of mine go. But the product of those is that usually in being able to sit with it, stay present, not run away from it, surrender to it, the experience, it takes me, I guess I'd almost describe it, it like drags me into the depths of my subconscious.
Yeah.
And in there, it often takes me to the things that I don't want to look at. And that may not sound pleasant, but it's important. We naturally avoid thinking about things that trouble us, but in avoiding those, we don't solve them. They just stay there, So ayahuasca has this way for a lot of people, and myself included, of like taking you by the hand and go, look at this. You need to look at this, and that may be problems with your relationships or traumas that you've been holding on to, pain of what ways people have hurt you that you haven't been able to let go. And then through that process of connecting with it, generally speaking, when all goes well, it culminates in a purge, a letting go of whatever this thing you hold on to. And very often there's a literal purge. You'll throw up and you'll feel that thing that you connected with leave your body.
Yeah. Well, thank you for giving that description. I love that, the forcing you into your subconscious to basically do your shadow work, to look at those things that you don't typically choose to look at, and try to resolve it somehow and release it, let it go. Yeah, that's great.
It's really beautiful, and it's not necessarily for everybody, but if anybody listening is feeling called or interested, I would highly recommend looking into it. It's an intense experience, but it's, generally speaking, if you pick the right place, it's a safe experience, and it can definitely do wonders for people that are struggling and traditional ways have not been so useful for them.
Yeah. So I guess I think we've kind of tiptoed around this a little bit, but what do you see, or how would you determine success in someone healing from trauma? Like what does that entail? What does that look like? And how can someone maintain it?
Yeah. I'll say I would love to say like it all of a sudden you feel happy all the time.
Yeah,
and,
right.
Everything is great and life flows smoothly. And unfortunately, I'll be honest, that's not really how it works. But that said, it's not to dissuade anybody who's looking to heal. But what it looks like more often is it's more. I would say it looks like more freedom, emotional freedom, more peace. Let me think of how to say this. Like, okay, for example, when I left Jehovah's Witnesses for many years, I just carried around a lot of anger about Jehovah's Witnesses, and in a way that it kind of ate at me, and mad about lost time, all that time I put into it, and what felt like for nothing. And I'd be lying if I say sometimes I don't still get angry about those things.
Sure. Yeah.
Or they don't bother me.
Yeah.
But they don't lead my experience anymore. I guess that's the difference. When trauma really has a hold on you, it whether consciously or unconsciously, it plays a role in shades every experience you have.
And every relationship.
Right, exactly. And and it's another example would be like, with grief, like if somebody you love very dearly dies. When they first die, and especially if you don't really deal with it in any way, it's going to hurt real bad, and it's going to affect your life, and it's going to make life really difficult. Now, will you ever get to a point where you don't feel sad about the person you lost? No, of course not. Whenever you think about that person, you will have feelings of sadness. But when you've done the work, when you've had the time to do some healing around it, it's not going to dominate your experience. It's going to be something you can visit from time to time and have your feelings about it, but it's not going to cast a cloud over everything you do. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, especially I think in these high control religions, where it is a really traumatic experience, and leaving when you have people that are vilifying you and saying, okay, now you've joined Satan's side, you just wanted to sin, all these reasons we talked about earlier, that the members will vilify the person that's leaving the
Yeah.
group, that there's a lot of reason to feel hurt and
Yeah.
to get angry about it.
Yeah.
And that there's a time when that anger almost takes over, and
Hmm.
and you can't really see anything but that anger. But so what I heard you say is that healing is a release of that anger, not that it goes away completely, but that when it does come up, it doesn't control you, and it doesn't spill out and impact your relationship with other people, or just your relationship with living in the world in
Yeah.
general. What replaces it? Like what is that mechanism of letting go of something like anger or grief or fear or anxiety? How does somebody actually do that and accomplish it?
What is that? Well, it sounds like you're asking two questions. How does that accomplish, and what's replaced?
Yeah, that is.
I could say
It is two
for the question
questions.
of
Yeah.
what's replaced, that's a hard one to answer, but it makes me think of this Buddhist saying. I think it was quoted as a Buddhist saying this, and somebody asked him, like, what did you get from meditating? And he said, I didn't get anything from meditating, but I lost my anxiety, my depression, my fear of death, that sort of thing. So that's, it's hard for me to say what replaces it, because what replaces it really could be anything you want.
Well, I think
but
you used the word freedom before.
yeah,
So like if you're losing the fear of death, the fear of these things, then whatever control that fear had over your life, you don't have that anymore, and you're free to make more informed choices that aren't being informed by that fear.
right.
I don't know. I'm asking.
No, that's exactly it. That was
Okay.
very well put.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's that you're able to make choices that aren't dictated by this trauma, or by the fear of being hurt again, that kind of thing. So many things of what we do is just sort of to protect ourselves. So you're able to move on and let go of that fear.
Yeah. And then the second part of that question, which was, what's the mechanism? Like how do you, when you're working with people, what are some of the common struggles that you see as they're wanting to let go of the anger, wanting to let go of the fear, wanting to let go of the anxiety, but they just don't know how?
I don't think there's a simple answer to that. It's a combination of a lot of things, and it's different for each person. I can give you some examples of the types of things.
I'd love that. Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, let me say the part of the way I conceptualize things is it's about moving energy, and that there's kind of trapped energy in the body. Now, I'm not an energy worker, but it's just a conceptual idea that anger or sadness, or it's something that is, it's context based, but there is something about it that it just needs a release in some way. It needs to be channeled in some way. So with that in mind, there's a good amount of people I could say that just the process of attending therapy themselves is immensely healing in itself. Just speaking their story, being able to say out loud, this is what happened to me. Being able to, along the same lines, being able to get angry or upset. I can't tell you how many people come in and like they start to talk about their anger and immediately go, but Jehovah's Witnesses meant well, and other people had it worse, and find all these reasons not to feel that thing that's welling up inside them.
So it's pushing it down.
Yeah. And so my job in a lot of those cases is to go, wait a minute, you have a right to be angry, Yeah, well, I don't want to be one of those people that becomes angry and bitter. No, you won't. It's possible to have the feeling of anger, express it, and not get stuck in it. They're afraid of it, in a lot of ways. So in a lot of ways, that's it. Or just grieving certain types of losses, like and really making space for that. And people, have really intense experiences. They cry or they may get really upset. And that for them is what needs to be done. For other people, there's things that require more action. Like I was saying earlier, there's something about the doing, the active making choices that go against these feelings of guilt that are keeping them in place. So sometimes people need a more structured approach, and along with those lines, I use them like a cognitive behavioral approach, where we break down something into smaller steps, where we set goals each week to push a little bit further into this area that they find uncomfortable, that's out of their comfort zone. And combined with this idea of exposure therapy, the more they're exposed to these experiences, the more that they will find their way about them. Other times it's more of like an academic approach. There's sometimes people are stuck in that line of, I don't think I believe in the religion, but I'm not 100% sure. Okay, let's get some material out there. Let's get some books. Let's get some let's get you connected with other people who have left the religion, other people's experiences. Let's give you more information so that you can not feel so on the fence, I mean, I could probably go on, but one more I'm thinking of is like, I use a narrative approach sometimes, where helping people connect with the idea that our experiences are largely dictated by the stories that we tell about our experiences, how we interpret it. So there's work there. Sometimes the sticking point is they've created a story around some traumatic experience that
You're speaking my language right now, Ryan.
Yeah.
I'm all about the stories.
Yeah. That's one of my favorite ways to work, because that's really, I think, the truth of it.
Yeah. So helping somebody change their story will help them change, because a certain story, but again, I'm going to go back and geek out on this book, Inner Size and the Neural Pathways. And you had mentioned energy earlier. And I thought, well, I mean, we're talking about neurons and synapses firing in these neural pathways. It is this bioelectric brain of ours. It really is energy. That we've conditioned ourselves through these stories. We tell these stories and frame our experience in a certain way that makes us feel a certain way. Like we've got these feelings and emotions that are attached to these stories. But these stories are not complete. They're not accurate. They're constructions, they're fictions, and they're not taking in everything that happened. They're focusing on certain things. And so what I try to do, and I'm going to school right now. I'm getting a master's of science in clinical mental health counseling. So in a couple of years, I'll be trained.
You're going to make a great counselor.
Well, thank you. I hope so. I'm a life coach right now, and I've been doing that for about 1.5 years and really enjoying that. But so trying to help people recognize the stories that they're telling, there's a connection to the feelings that you're feeling. And so if you can change the stories, as long as you're being honest, because that's the thing that people say is, I don't want to make stuff up. I don't want to be untrue. And so I'll say, well, there's other things about this that could be true that maybe you're ignoring and you're not focusing on. Is that part of your approach as well when you're working with people in their stories? Trying to help them reconstruct the story?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and again, once again, you're hitting all the major points, which is that resistance that people think, oh, well, I don't want to make things up. And I understand that. That's not where we're at either. We're not here to fabricate something, but only to recognize that in any given situation, there are thousands, if not millions, of variables. And that the way our mind works is to choose a select handful of those variables, create a story that often is built on previous stories. I always, the go-to for me is always, I could tell you the world is a terrible place, and I could give you plenty of facts to back that up. I could make an argument for the world being a terrible place. I could do the same thing by saying the world is a beautiful place. And I could give you plenty of evidence and arguments to back that up. Both of those are stories, and so why not create a story that's going to work for you? Not at the expense of, like you said, of lying, but just choosing to direct your attention to the things that are really going to best serve you.
I had an experience recently where I was working with someone, and we were talking about this idea of love, and he was really concerned about love because he didn't ever want to use love like you're putting lipstick on a pig and say, this harm that I'm doing to somebody else, I'm calling it love so that it's not. So he's like really resistant to anything around this idea of love. And I think that's something that came out of his experience being in this high control religion, where they're saying, if you love me, keep my commandments, and the commandments aren't always loving. Have these bigoted attitudes towards LGBTQ people, or all of this stuff in the name of love and acceptance that isn't really that. And so it creates these wounds and these scars. Anyway, yeah. So I'm really interested, especially in that narrative approach. And then you mentioned cognitive behavioral therapy. Do you see any cognitive distortions like I'm somewhat familiar with them, like mind reading and catastrophizing and things like that are more prominent to coming out of a high control religion?
Yeah.
Or like black and white thinking, all or
yeah,
nothing
for sure.
thinking.
Yeah. That's definitely there. Yeah. I mean, I see that, but particularly with the black and white thinking, I see that constantly. And people get very hung up on what is right, what is wrong. That's a big sticking point for people. And that's problematic because the world is not like that.
Yeah.
And the world they came from is like that.
Yeah.
But the actual world is not like that. So that's definitely a piece of helping them recognize that and loosening up those types of ways of thinking about things. Yeah, I guess that's all I have for that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, if I have listeners that want to work with you and they want to get in touch with you, is that something that's possible?
Absolutely. Yeah. I work with people all over the world. I work online.
Okay.
So no matter where you are, as long as you are English speaking, you feel free to reach out. You can find me at drryanlee.com.
Okay.
You can see a little bit about my services there, and you can also connect with me there, or if you'd like, you can even set up an appointment. I offer free consultations.
Yeah.
And I would say the majority of the people that do the consultation end up becoming clients, but even those that don't, I've gotten feedback that even just the free consultation is very helpful for people to get perspective on things.
Yeah. And I'll link to your website from this episode on the infantsonthrones.com website as well. And any final words that you'd like to say as we wrap this up?
I mean, for anyone listening, I just say keep doing what you're doing. If you're listening to this program, you're searching. Mm-hmm. You know, you're seeking answers. You're thinking about things, and keep that up. I feel like so many people who leave these high control religions, and I'm assuming this is similar for Mormons, that they feel so lost and alone and so disconnected, and most of the people in the world don't have the same kind of background that we have, and it can feel lonely, and sometimes it can feel as if maybe this is it, you know, is this just how life is going to be? And I can say from experience and from the people I've worked with, it doesn't have to be that way. It does get better. And the process for doing that is just keep connecting, keep reaching out, keep learning, keep educating yourself, keep looking at the things that don't feel right in you, and don't just turn the other way. Really look at them and figure out how to get to a place and how to engage in the world in a way which makes you feel more whole.
Awesome. I love it. Thank you so much, Ryan, for taking
Thank you, Glenn. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah. And I mean, if I can ever figure out a way to get down there to Peru, I'll come and hang out with you.
I have a spare room. You are 100% welcome.
Awesome. And your dogs look amazing too.
Thanks. Yeah. I got these guys by my side.
All right. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Glenn.
All right. So what did you think of that discussion? If you'd like to share that with me, you can send me an email, or you can record yourself and send that as an email. And, you know, if you're interested in life coaching, reach out to me. I'll let you know how that goes. And there's also some group coaching that's available right now. We're doing a group right now. We've had a couple of interactions over the last few weeks. It's really nice. So if you're interested in joining a group that is focused on recovering from Mormonism, kind of in the ways that I discussed today with Dr. Lee, reach out, let me know. Send me an email at infantsonthrones@gmail.com, and I'll send you some information. And I also do free life coaching consults. So if any of you are interested in having a 30-minute conversation with me, talk about some things that are on your mind, just reach out. We'll schedule it. No pressure to do coaching or not. You just want to talk, I'm here for you. So thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones, where I'm trying to help you put down the weapons that you use against yourself. You don't need them anymore.
Put down the weapons that you use against yourself. You don't need them anymore. Lay down the weapons that you use against the world. We don't need another war. Put down the weapons that you use against yourself.
Hi, this is Hillary.
Matthew, Ryan,
Carol,
Keith,
Ashley, and I like to play bingo online while listening to Infants on Thrones.
You can comment on this episode on the website, infantsonthrones.com.
And if you really like what you hear, give the Quorum a 5-star rating and write a short review on iTunes.
I did.
Anyone for the closing prayer?
My worst crime is an inside job. Dark thoughts taking over like an inside mob. I tune into the scene between the eyes and take a breath.
Thank you for listening to Infants on Thrones.
I sit still and watch the thoughts float past me. Never mind the future, never mind what the past be. I like to jump and let the universe catch me. 3, 4, watch the beauty blow past me. I keep my pockets light, destination in sight. Keep my actions elevated to compassionate heights. I'm walking past the fight, laying down on the night. Choosing love when I pick up this mic, so we can